AI startup Sierra striking a new partnership with Minted. Here to tell us more about that is Bret Taylor, the co-founder of Sierra, who also wears a lot of other hats, including chairman of OpenAI's board. He's joining us now to talk about that news at the state of AI, a lot of other stuff. Bret, it's great to see you in person.
Great to see you too.
Thanks for being here. Well, we'll start with Minted, who I was saying is a company I use my Christmas cards for. I'm sure a lot of people know Minted from that. What is happening with this partnership? What are they actually building using Sierra?
Well, Minted is, first of all, one of my favorite products in the world. Every year, maybe I procrastinate a little longer than I care to admit to get our cards out the door, but you know, I think all of us have that basket on our kitchen counter of all the photos of all of our friends. Most of those come from Minted, and it's a neat product, but it can be complex, you know, as you're designing a card from this marketplace of independent artists, getting out the door. If you design it late, how do you expedite the shipping? If you're confused about how to lay out your photos. And if you imagine a business like Minted, where all of your business comes in a handful of weeks, you know, between Thanksgiving and Christmas, how do you provide great customer service and great customer experience with that kind of peak season? And AI is the answer. So they've built an AI agent on the Sierra platform, and it's helping them meet the demand of their customers in an exceptional way, help people get their cards out on time, whether it's for a wedding or for Christmas. And it's such a great experience. I'm so proud of the partnership.
A lot of us can relate to that. I think the Christmas card and procrastination. Is there a personality? I know that's been a hallmark of some of the other partnerships that you've done. I think of, what is it, Duncan Smothers, the Chubby's partnership. Does this one have a name and a sort of a different personality?
Well, you know, this is the great thing about AI agents. They can be a brand ambassador for your company because they actually have a voice. And so it's interesting for a lot of retailers we work with, like Chubby's, they come in with a brand book and it's really opinionated. For some other companies, they're like, wow, we haven't really thought about, you know, our voice this intentionally before. And it's interesting, if you look at the waves of technology innovation, the web gave birth to web design. And now that's a title that's pretty common. I think if you go to Indeed, there's probably 1 billion listings for web designers. I think we're going to, in the future, have conversation designers, voice designers, because this will be one of the main ways people interact with your brand. And so Minted has a wonderful brand voice. It's personalized. You know, they serve 75 million households, which is kind of incredible. And you know, I'm hopeful that their AI agent will be one of the main ways people experience the Minted brand. And what a cool opportunity to personalize that experience.
So what does it actually look like? Are you speaking to the agent? I know you've sort of been allergic to the word chatbot. How is it different than a chatbot?
Well, it's so funny. Like, if you just surveyed CNBC viewers and you asked them their opinion of chatbots, you probably get 0 out of 10 people saying they like it, and you immediately think of those robotic things that get in the way from you talking to a real person.
Yeah.
But if you think of ChatGPT, I bet 10 out of 10 people say, oh, that's amazing. I use it every day. I just made an anime version of myself the other weekend. What is the difference? And I always joke the difference is one works really well. One's delightful. And so for our customers, we actually encourage them to call their agents AI assistants or give it a name like Duncan Smothers, because you want your customers to know this is one of the good ones. This is one of the ones that will actually be empathetic, that will understand what you mean, that has access, can take action on your behalf, whether it's changing your Sirius XM plan or helping you fix your ADT alarm system or helping you with your Minted card this holiday season. And you know, so that's really the difference, is they really, really work well. And you can see it in the customer satisfaction scores. You know, 4.5, 4.6 out of 5, often higher than the customer satisfaction scores of the call centers that they're augmenting. And that's kind of remarkable. People just love chatting with these AI agents.
Is it a phone conversation? Or are you actually typing back and forth like you would with the ChatGPT? What does it actually physically look like?
Well, what's cool about the Sierra platform is it's both. So let's just go through Harmony, Sirius XM's AI agent. You can see Harmony on the Sirius XM homepage. If you call them on the phone, it's the same AI agent. So what's really neat about these platforms is you're making a conversational customer experience, and you can meet your customers where they are. So if they're calling you on the phone, you know, perhaps they're chatting over WhatsApp, maybe they're on your website and you're having a conversation there. That's the really neat thing about these experiences, is these AI agents can show up exactly where your customers are. And I think it's important because if you try to find the phone number of most consumer brands, you'll find a hard time. Why is that? Well, it's expensive. It turns out it costs, call it between $10 and $20 to have that phone call.
Per call?
Yeah, usually, just because, there's someone's got to answer the phone, right? And that only works if the customer interaction is worth $10 to $20.
Right.
And how many interactions are actually worth that? And if you have a small question, that's a money-losing event for most consumer brands. Now with AI agents, when you bring down the cost of those interactions by a couple of order of magnitude, now say, yeah, call us, no problem.
Yeah.
And I think that's the really neat thing about AI. I think a lot of people think about AI as automation. It's taking something expensive and making it cheaper. If you ever talk to a CEO, they're sort of interested in cost savings. They're interested in growth first, though.
Yeah.
Every CEO in the world is. And the idea that they'll just recoup the cost savings is laughable. Instead, I think now that you've brought down the cost of these personalized interactions by 2 orders of magnitude, how many more conversations can you have with your customers? Are we going to see a Super Bowl ad where someone puts their phone number up and says, call us? That's actually economical now. And it was laughable before. So that's what I'm so excited about. And it's so neat that these agents work in any modality. Chat, voice, we'll probably see video sometime in the future. Maybe you'll be FaceTiming a brand.
Really? Okay, wow.
You know, and this is the sky's the limit with this technology, and it's such an exciting time for consumer brands.
What about the revenue model for Sierra? If it's bringing costs down that significantly, what does it look like on the back end? How are you making money off of each transaction?
Well, we have a really unique business model. We're really trying to change the way companies purchase software. We call it outcomes-based. So our customers only pay us when the AI agent autonomously finishes the job. And if the agent can't and it has to escalate to someone, it's free.
Really?
And it's the whole idea, the neat thing about agents, the word comes from agency. And it essentially means you're affording software some degree of autonomy to make decisions and take action. And our view is that since agents can do a job, you should only pay for a job well done. And what's really neat about that is you don't need to be a CFO to say, wow, we're paying when this actually saves us money. What a really simple and business model. And so we really think it will change the way people think about software. I'm really hopeful that when we engage with our customers, it's really about driving value for them, and we only get value when they get value.
That's interesting. That is very unique in terms of the subscription model. The word agent has gotten so much buzz this year. It feels like coming into 2025, it was sort of the AI word of the year. You guys were obviously ahead of this. How is it different than what OpenAI and Anthropic and others are doing? What are you offering that's differentiated?
Well, let me just talk about what an agent means, because the web had sites, mobile has apps, AI has agents. And just like not every mobile app is the same, not every agent is the same, so the word's not one thing. I really think about agents kind of in 3 categories. One will be personal agents. These are the agents that will help you schedule a vacation, maybe triage your inbox in the morning, maybe help you schedule a delivery for something you just purchased. Then you'll have agents that sort of do a job at your company. There's some really neat agent companies building software engineering agents, being paralegal agents. And then there's the agents that Sierra works on, which is around customer experience. This is like your .com of your websites. There's lots of websites, but there's one that has your brand at the top.
Right.
And we help companies build those agents. The one that has your brand at the top, that kind of does everything your customers need, which is pretty broad for most brands. And our view is that by focusing on this one area and doing it exceptionally well, we're not selling technology, we're selling a solution to a problem. And we're really making it easy, even for non-technology teams, to embrace this technology now and really make it accessible and shovel-ready, not require a huge technology investment to do it. To use an analogy to the cloud ecosystem, you have infrastructure as a service. You can lease servers in the cloud from Amazon Web Services and Azure, and you have software as a service, where you can buy a piece of software that just solves a problem for you. We're kind of on the solve a problem for you end of the spectrum. But I think, everyone's going to benefit from this investment, because just like the birth of the internet gave birth to cloud computing and this huge industry of different companies serving different parts of that supply chain, you're going to see the same thing in artificial intelligence.
Do you worry at all that some of the bigger LLM companies would just copy what you're doing? That there's a possibility that they might say, oh, this is an interesting space, why don't we offer this as well?
I think there's always the possibility of more competition in a fast-growing market. I think this market is really, really large, and the idea that infrastructure companies will do everything for all people doesn't really have credibility to me. Going back to my analogy about the cloud market, you have infrastructure players like Azure and Amazon Web Services. Why does the software as a service market exist? Why don't they just do everything? Well, it turns out that deeply understanding customer problems and providing an out-of-the-box solution to those problems, there's really a long tail of intellectual property and nuanced sort of go-to-market tactics to deliver that solution. And I think the same will be true of AI. So, certainly we think about competitors from all angles. I'm an entrepreneur. What's that Andy Grove quote? Only the paranoid survive. But the idea that we're going to be buying all software from a small handful of companies, just doesn't have credibility to me.
What are you seeing in terms of enterprise spending? Has there been any sort of pullback from potential customers based on some of the geopolitical turmoil we're seeing right now?
Well, certainly there's a lot of uncertainty out there. I think everyone's kind of in a wait and see how it turns out mindset, or at least that's what I've heard from my conversations with executives. What's interesting, though, is I think it's really driving attention on artificial intelligence, because whether you've the cost of your product has gone up because of tariffs. You might be focused on trying to recoup those costs. You don't need to raise prices. AI is a great technique to do that. Similarly, as you're just thinking broadly about how to find growth in a market that has shifted really dramatically, investing in customer experience with platforms like Siri is an increased focus. So I think there's uncertainty right now, but I think artificial intelligence, automation, cost savings, I think have actually been elevated in that conversation. So I think it's a really fun time to be in this market.
Is AI immune from any IT spending slowdown, do you think?
I think AI isn't one thing. It's interesting because if I had to characterize the past 2 years, there's been a lot of excitement just on the models themselves. And you're investing in the infrastructure to train and do inference on these models. You're licensing the models for experiments. The applications market, which Siri is in, is relatively new. And I think that's really where I see the acceleration in spending, because I think there's this concept you'll hear from a lot of heads of procurement, ROI, return on investment. And it turns out that if you just buy a model and you have to build a solution from scratch, it's expensive. And you have to invest a lot of technology resources for that last mile. When you buy a solution like Siri, you can just turn it on. And so my hypothesis is actually the AI applications market will really benefit right now from, I'll say, the scrutiny on spending that might come from a period of uncertainty, and that's really why we're focused on this market.
It's interesting. It's so different. We also should mention you were at Salesforce for a long time. I think of what Microsoft is doing and Salesforce. A lot of the big tech companies are sort of bundling their AI offerings with other parts of the software business. Is it an advantage to be more specified and more narrow with an AI app, I would think, at this point, if you don't need to worry about the broader IT spending slowdown?
I really believe in focus. I think that we're really not trying to be all things for all people, and you know when to call us. Do you want an AI agent to pick up the phone for your customers? Call Siri. It's pretty simple. And so I really believe in that. And actually, I think that right now, as you think about sort of if there's more scrutiny on spend, I think really focusing on the most valuable use cases has a lot of value. But different companies have different areas of focus. We're a young company. I think we don't have the luxury of doing all things for all people. But I really believe in the market. And I also, right now, there's this interesting ebb and flow from large incumbent technology companies to startups, and who has advantages, who doesn't. As a large company, you have large distribution channels and large relationships. I think right now I'm a huge believer in the startup ecosystem here in the Bay Area, in part because the technology is changing so rapidly. The value of being nimble and responding to the technology changes is so great. I'm just seeing some really compelling startups, not just Siri. It's just such an exciting time in the Bay Area right now. Are
you relieved to not be part of a public company with all the market volatility?
Absolutely. I have so much empathy for every public company CEO. I just think it's challenging in a period of uncertainty, and you always want both your employees and investors to take the long view. But when you open the stocks app every morning and have a heart attack, it's tough. It's been fun to just focus on our customers and focus on building a great company and not have that roller coaster of a public market scorecard every morning. I say that though, but our customers are impacted, and so I try to go into every conversation just with a lot of empathy, just because different people are impacted differently depending on how all of this plays out.
And you've sat in that seat. You know what it's like to be on the other side of it. As you think about sort of the global landscape and expanding, has it changed the way you think about potentially being a global company at some point? If we have this more protectionist reality, do you feel like there's as much opportunity to go into Europe, into Asia, and into other markets?
Well, it's a weird coincidence you said that, because we actually just opened an office in London, and which is our first office outside the United States, which is a big deal for a young company like ours. This technology can benefit every company in the world. And I think broadly speaking, we're enabling brands to have personalized conversations with their customers at scale. And it's a really, really unique opportunity. And as a consequence, we want to be a global company. And I think you have to be where your customers are. I do think that, whether it's data sovereignty or tariffs, like certainly the market is shifting. But I'm just a first principles person. Is the technology useful to your company? If it is, let's figure out a way to deliver it to you. And there's never been a more, I think, shovel-ready opportunity in AI than building agents for customer experience. And we're gonna make it work no matter how the geopolitical landscape changes. And I'm confident. Actually, just we've had so much early traction in Europe that there's equal excitement on the other side of the pond.
And so much is changing so quickly. By the time we publish this, I mean, it could be a totally different tariff dynamic and discussion. On the geopolitical side, AI has been in the center of that discussion as well. Are there certain policies or moves that the White House has done, whether it's chip exports or anything on the policy side, that you would support to say, hey, this is actually going to protect American innovation? What do you think about some of the White House moves and anything that you're especially supportive of?
Well, look, I actually think this administration has been really pro-AI. Infrastructure investments, I think, broadly, the administration really wants U.S. AI companies to thrive and win. So I'm really optimistic, and I think it's a really productive relationship. And more than anything else, I just think it's really important that the U.S. lead on this technology. I think we are a free country with democratic values, and this technology will have a big impact in the world, and I want companies that have those democratic values to be developing it. So I'm really optimistic about the future of AI in the United States.
We haven't talked to you, I don't think, since DeepSEEK. I guess looking back on that, it feels like a long time ago. This was only a couple months ago. What is the lasting impact, and what's your take on the AI landscape post DeepSEEK? Did it have any of the lasting changes that we saw in sort of the knee-jerk first week reaction?
I actually, big picture, I think it just represents this broad trend, which is AI is getting better and cheaper at the same time in dramatically fast pace. And so I'm probably gonna get some of these numbers wrong, but when we started Siri, the best model in the world was GPT-4 from OpenAI. And it cost, I think, $60 per million output tokens. Just whether or not you know what million output tokens means, $60 for that unit.
Yeah.
The models today are more than 2 orders of magnitude less expensive and much higher quality, often by a factor of like 2 to 10, depending on the evaluation. So you've got something that is more than twice as good and 2 orders of magnitude cheaper in 2 years. It's crazy. I mean, how many technologies mature that way? So certainly there's some like geopolitical undertones to any advancement, but then you look at all the models that OpenAI has released that are inexpensive and high quality. It's just an amazing time to both be an entrepreneur in the AI space, but also just an amazing time to be a person. I mean, how neat is it that, I don't know if you played around with all the cool image generation tools from OpenAI. Can you imagine someone showing that to you 3 years ago?
No.
You wouldn't believe it. And now you can make a action figure version of yourself by asking for it, in a prompt. I always came from a generation where I would edit movies by connecting 2 VCRs together. I don't know, you press play on one, record on the other. This is what I had to do to, become Orson Welles as a 10-year-old. Our kids are going to be able to describe, sci-fi special effects and add explosions to their movies by just describing it. We're just in a period where these tools are just getting better and cheaper and more accessible. And actually, I think going to the sort of OpenAI vantage point, our mission is to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. Having this technology just get more affordable, more accessible, so that tools like ChatGPT can reach everyone in the world, I think it will be the way most people in the world consume AI, and I think that's an incredible opportunity.
What does that mean for the labor force? I think about sort of the fun side of messing around with image generation, but also productivity and how it changes the entire global labor force. Do you have thoughts on what it means for employment, how you think about reskilling people? I just think there's probably effects that we're not even able to conceive at this point.
Well, first, it is definitely automating some tasks that we're doing today. And I know it's sort of an overused example, but when we invented the automated teller machine, we didn't decrease the number of bank branches, nor did we decrease the number of people in those branches. They just did different things. And I think broadly with AI, we're going to see a similar trend. I think, you know, if you think about just sort of productivity, you're automating some tasks, and I think we will do higher order things, things that are more leveraged, more valuable. That transition can be complicated, you know, because if you're the person, I don't know if you saw Hidden Figures, that movie about the calculators.
Yes.
These were people.
You're right.
And then, you know, in that film, you can see the IBM supercomputer that was being introduced at NASA. Kind of interesting, just I didn't even know until seeing that film that the name calculator was a job description before I was born after that.
Yeah.
We've gone through these transitions before where we essentially take something that is scarce, whether it's power or food, and we make it plentiful. Now we're making intelligence plentiful, and it used to be scarce. I think it will have broad-based implications on what we do, but I think we will find really interesting jobs around it, and we'll look back 50 years from now and say, gosh, can you imagine not having intelligence be plentiful? And I think in the same way we think about, you know, power in a way that you just flip on a light switch and it used to be something scarce. I always like to say that I think it is just going to be a disruptive time for all of us. And notably, by the way, software engineering is one of the professions being the most disrupted by AI. If you go into any CTO's office, they'll tell you over half their code is being generated by AI right now. So it's, you know, we're not immune to this either. We're all being impacted. I always like to say we're all accountants, and Microsoft Excel just got invented. You know, are you going to show up to the meeting with a binder and a calculator? Or are you going to be the first one to learn pivot tables? You know, and I think right now for all of us, all of our jobs are changing a lot, but it can be really empowering. And so I really think if, you know, I've got kids, I'm encouraging them to use these tools. This is like the new bicycle for the mind, as Steve Jobs always said. And I think it's an opportunity for all of us to excel in our jobs. I don't mean to minimize the disruption, but I think people who lean into it can really find new opportunities in their careers, and that's super exciting.
That is a good call back to the Steve Jobs analogy, the bicycle of the mind. I mean, it's amazing what you can do with these, and also for kids, I would think it's going to completely change the way they learn. And I think the calculator is also going to.
Well, it's interesting you said that. My daughter came home with Shakespeare for the first time, and my heart rate went up because I was not very good at iambic pentameter the first time. And we put it into ChatGPT, and it was amazing. And it was a conversation, and it was like having a tutor.
It's right,
And what's so excited about that, all kids learn differently. You've all had the bad teacher in, you know, one, and now you can go home and get instruction personalized to the way you learn. We've used ChatGPT to make cue cards. You can have ChatGPT quiz you on a topic.
Well,
very patient tutor. We're just figuring out all the uses of this, just like the early days of the internet. Do you remember, you know, Yahoo directory? We listed every website in a table of contents. It's laughable now, right? And then now there's like the internet grew as we sort of went from sort of like the 100 websites on the internet to what we have today. I think the use cases for AI we're just figuring out. And I think, as I said, I think it's important to think about the disruption it will have to different industries, but I also think the opportunities are great as well. And I really think that organizations and individuals who lean into it will find really great opportunities for your business, for your personal life, whether you're trying to parse a Shakespeare book in freshman English, or you're trying to find a leg up on a competitor. There's never been a greater opportunity to innovate.
It's fascinating. I mean, there's so much upside. I think there's also still the discussion and almost the elephant in the room of the safety discussion as well, because when we talk about kids and future generations, you also worry about, people have compared this to nuclear energy and what it's capable of. How do you think about the safety conversation? And from the OpenAI perspective, there was a letter from ex-staffers too, who were sort of seemingly supportive of not having OpenAI transition to, I guess, restructure into a full for-profit. How are you balancing the optimism and honestly the sheer terror that it seems like is still out there and the nervousness around this technology?
Safety is the most important part of the OpenAI mission. You know, the mission is to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits all of humanity. If the technology is not safe, we have not achieved that mission. So it's a little bit like the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm, right? And you know, your doctor can't heal you if there's harm. And so I have a lot of optimism. First, just to say it though, it is the most important thing OpenAI works on without question. So we take it very seriously. But if you meet some of the safety researchers, you would be inspired just by the level of depth and nuance with which they're approaching this problem. We have a great board member, Zico Coulter, who's a professor at Carnegie Mellon, who's an expert in jailbreaking, which is an interesting topic in safety, among other things. Yeah. And I think we're putting the world's greatest minds on this problem. And you know, I really do think that the solution to most problems in AI is more AI. And I really believe that if you look at the research labs, OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, some of the greatest minds in the world are working on this problem. And I'm just a huge believer in science. And I believe that these researchers will help us iteratively and responsibly to release AI that continues to be safe, where we can realize the benefits in a safe way.
And the public is putting a lot of trust in private companies as part of this. Is there anything the White House can do or that governments should be doing to make sure that every actor is a good actor, at least for what they can control in the US, that everybody is following that Hippocratic oath, as you put it?
Certainly with a technology that's meaningful, everything has to be sort of public-private partnership. You know, I think it's, and particularly as you said, you want to ensure sort of a standard that everyone meets. I think the main thing is ensuring that anything that in the sort of the realm of regulation looks towards the future. The technology is changing really rapidly, and so there's just a real risk that you end up looking at maybe too narrow of a horizon and making regulation that actually either slows down in a negative way the positive progress in AI, or is something that just doesn't apply to the future versions of the technology. So I think it's an important conversation. I also think it's great that, you know, OpenAI is a mission-driven organization because it really aligns our interests with the interests of safety globally.
I would think that's a hard job, especially if you think about how long it takes a bill to get through Congress and how quickly AI is changing. I would think that's a nearly impossible task to design something that's relevant even a year from now. It's moving so quickly. It
is. The technology is just changing so rapidly. I read an article recently about a regulation that mentioned fax machines. You know, at some point, I can't remember what it was, and you know, I think there is just a real risk that, you know, the problems that we foresee today may not be the problems. I think of that book, The Anxious Generation, about the impact of smartphones. You know, if you go back to the, you know, Steve Jobs introducing the iPhone, how many people thought about that? Yeah. So, you know, I think it's important that we really let the technology play out a little bit, really see its applications in the industry. Obviously, you want to have good guardrails of safety, but I think we have to go in with some humility. The first order effects are probably not obvious, let alone the second order effects. And that's what I meant about a partnership. I think we need to let innovators innovate. I think we need to let builders build. That doesn't mean these aren't important conversations, but I think there's a certain arrogance to presume that we understand all the impacts of this technology right now. I certainly don't, and I'm in the middle of it.
I wonder if there's lessons too from the social media era. You obviously spent a lot of time at Google, you were at Facebook, you were at Twitter. Are there things that you wish you'd done differently, thinking about, you know, the Jonathan Haidt book and that reality that, you know, it was hard to see in the moment, but looking back, a lot of it feels obvious. How are you thinking about it now?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I think technology's changed by sort of how they're used and who uses them, which is an obvious thing to say. But when I started at Facebook, it was only used by college students. Right. And so once you've connected the whole world on a platform, the problems change from, you know, sharing your class schedule to something much greater than that. So, you know, certainly I've reflected a lot on it, no doubt about it. But I'm not sure that we could have had the foresight in a lot of ways when you have people sharing their class schedule and setting up parties. You have to pull the thread pretty far to get to where Meta is today. So, you know, I do think technologies, you know, are not inherently good or bad. It's how they're applied. I think it's unreasonable for technology company, let alone society, to predict, you know, the second order effects, let alone third order effects of all these technologies. And it's just important when, you know, society observes issues with the technologies company act on that, you know, and are a responsible party and sort of acting on them. And I think that's interesting, like, you know, whether it's the smartphone, and I think, you know, screen addiction, or whether it's social media, or it's AI, you know, technology companies need to be a part of the solution to these problems. But I also don't think that means that people should foresee 10 years into the future what I don't think anyone could have foreseen, and it just means that you have to be an active, responsible participant in how technology is developed.
And sort of reacting in the moment when you do see nefarious effects and things that you can control, because you're right, I think at the moment, you couldn't have seen 10 years down the road.
Yeah, or at least I wasn't smart enough to, and I didn't met anyone smart enough to. And yeah, just you need to be active and responsible,
right.
you know, and I think, you know, I know a lot of these leaders in technology, and I deeply respect them, and I think people want to have a positive impact on the world. It's complicated, but I really feel a lot of optimism about the future.
What about Elon? Elon Musk has been sort of flying the flag of AI safety. He was obviously an early co-founder. There's been a lot of back and forth on sort of the restructuring of OpenAI and his attempts to block it. Did you take his bid seriously when he said he wanted to buy that nonprofit arm? And what's your expectation going forward that OpenAI can accomplish that goal of becoming a full for-profit?
Oh, look, I'm focused on one thing, which is ensuring that OpenAI can achieve its mission. So as we think about the future structure of OpenAI, it's always just through that lens. You know, how can we build AGI and ensure that it benefits humanity? And you know, just to state something, the not-for-profit's not going away. I think there's been a lot of conversations about that implied that, and that's just not true. So can't really comment on a lot of the specifics, but the not-for-profit's not going away, and it's really all about that mission, and that's our exclusive focus as fiduciaries on the board.
It's been a lot of noise back and forth on Twitter.
Yeah.
So I didn't ask you about sort of what is under Sierra. We talked a lot about these different models. You've described it, I think, as a constellation of models. Tell us kind of how it works under the hood, who is actually behind the scenes. I know you also have your own proprietary models, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I would say actually, you know, when I talked about the AI market, where you have people building models and then you have AI applications, I would say the way we built it is probably typical of an AI applications company, which is we use a lot of different models under the hood. We'll use some off the shelf. Every time OpenAI releases a new model, our engineers are first in line to try it out. We will fine-tune models as well, and what that means is you take a foundation model that's been trained on most of human knowledge and you fine-tune it to do a specific task. And then we'll build some of our own models as well. It turns out when you answer lots of phone calls, detecting, you know, if you have a TV on in the background, making sure that you don't interpret that as the person talking, turns out it's pretty hard.
Wow,
you know, these long tail of just really cool, hard problems, and that's why our customers work with us, is we can handle TVs being on in the background, you know, and so under the hood, if you actually, you know, chat with one of our agents, you're setting up your Sonos speaker, on any given one of the messages you type or say, we'll probably access 4 to 8 different models to decide what to do. And what's really neat about these models is they don't just generate, but they can actually reason. And you know, we use a lot of reasoning under the hood to actually think about what to do. The funniest thing is this model we call the supervisor. If the underlying model makes a decision, the supervisor will look at it and critique it and send it back with notes occasionally.
So there's like this corporate hierarchy within the models?
It's like proofreading an email. You know, it turns out that if you have AI actually double check its work, you can actually really improve its effectiveness. So we're always reading the latest and greatest research papers, ensuring that the Sierra platform always has the best practices in this world. And we can really use these models off the shelf. And if you think about it from, I'll say, an engineering and business standpoint, there's so many different models available now. You can really choose price, performance, quality, what's right for the task. And if you imagine you know, a transaction system in financial services that's doing billions of transactions today, you probably care about cost and performance a lot. You're probably willing to take a small hit on quality. If you're making a really complex decision, maybe in an insurance claims processing use case, you probably care about the quality of the decision more than whether it takes 1 second or 10 seconds, right? And so what's really neat now in this AI industry is these models are pieces of infrastructure that engineers are building on top of, and they can bring out different tools for the right job. And that's why it's such an exciting time. If you go back to ancient history of 4 years ago, you know, if you wanted AI, you had to staff up a data science team, collect proprietary data, train it, and then ironically, the model would be pretty mediocre, you know, maybe good at 1 or 2 things. You know, now you can start with a foundation model off the shelf that has most of human knowledge, fine-tune it to a different task, and can take an afternoon's worth of work and be 100 times higher quality than what you could have done 4 years ago. It's just a remarkable time in the industry.
What do you make of the commodity argument? That these are starting to look the same. Will they ever become commodities?
I think the most intelligent models will always be extremely differentiated. This is why the world uses ChatGPT, because the experience of doing so is just higher quality. I think there is a lot of other models where, what is the value of the 5th highest quality foundation model? And it's questionable. I heard one investor say these are the fastest depreciating assets of all time. The way I see it out is I think given the cost of training these models and given, how quickly different model trainers sort of catch up to others, I think it will lead to some consolidation. And going back to my analogies, if you look at the cloud infrastructure market, you saw a lot of consolidation, and there's a handful now of companies. If you want to lease a server in the cloud, there's only a few companies you'll select from. I think we'll go that direction with these models because to actually make the business model of training these models work, you need to be able to recoup your costs by having a fairly large-scale business, like a ChatGPT or Azure or something like that.
Right.
And so my sense on it is we'll see a lot of consolidation. We already have a little bit. I think a lot of the startups that were doing their own pre-training of models have already consolidated in. I think that will continue. But just look at the growth of ChatGPT. I think it turns out that being the best matters, and people, I think, are discerning, so I really think that it's a great business to be in.
But it's worth the investment to be the best. Like, investors will recoup that. You think about the amount of money that's going into maintaining that lead, it's going to be worth it in the end?
Well, from the OpenAI vantage point, we're a mission-driven company. So our mission is to create AGI and ensure that it benefits humanity. So that's our goal. And I think it turns out to be a great business as well. But the lens through which we judge our progress is the mission. And that's really how we think about the future of the organization.
An expensive mission at the same time.
But think of the value it unlocks. Whether it's building, just look at all the applications already, customer experience, software engineering, legal. I think this will unlock more economic value than any technology in history.
On the agent discussion too, I'm thinking about Apple with Siri and Amazon with Alexa. Those were sort of the OG agents. Why have they seemingly not kept up at the pace of others?
You never count out those companies. They're going to, every new iPhone, I'm the first in line to get it as well. And so, I'm confident that, on our smartphones, we'll see, amazing experiences in the future. I'm really excited for Apple Intelligence. So I like to look at these things sort of at a broader time horizon. The interesting thing about it is Siri, as you said, was one of the first, natural language interfaces to, available on your smartphone. The technology just shifted a lot. So you've got to kind of rethink, a technology strategy. But I'm excited. Like it'll happen. It's like here in Silicon Valley, everyone's sort of keeping score of how fast people are moving. I'm like, I don't do that. At the end of the day, this is one of the best devices in the world. Everyone will figure it out. The interesting thing about it, though, is I just think the way we interact with devices is just going to change a lot. We went from punch cards to mice and keyboards. With a green screen terminal to a graphical user interface. Then with the birth of the smartphone, there's a BlackBerry blip in there as well. And then went to smartphones, and now we spend a lot of our days staring at a glowing rectangle and typing on a touchscreen. Now software can actually understand what we're saying. And it's not like getting the weather or whatever you got from your Alexa. It's truly conversational. I wonder in 5 years, how much time will we spend tapping on a screen versus talking? That's an interesting thing. There's obviously like brain-computer interfaces, all these things. We're in this new era, and actually, I hope we get over the point where we're not all staring at our screens all the time. You go on the BART train, and it's like literally 100% of people staring at the screen. So as cool as these devices are, if you look at sci-fi movies, the most ergonomic way to interact with software is having a conversation. And now we've unlocked that potential. So I think it's exciting because we've gone through the smartphone era and it's defined, this generation of consumer technology. Are we at the point where new devices can exist that are conversational first? Does that help with things like the anxious generation? Because you're not just like glued to this screen all day. Can technology melt away and actually just be kind of invisible, like I think it probably should be? So I'm excited because I think whether it's companies like Apple or entrepreneurs, we're kind of at an inflection point where it's clear. I think there's opportunities for new experiences for the first time.
It also speaks to this change in consumer expectation. The fact that Siri would ever feel dumb to anybody is just mind-blowing, because it is still impressive. It still can do a lot compared to when we're talking about BlackBerries. So it's changing so quickly.
Well, that's the interesting thing, is any technology created 3 years ago or more, it's like a horse and carriage versus a flying car. And that's the awkward thing. And this is why, you know, you have to have like a strong constitution to be in the tech industry, because your advantage one day can end up antiquated the next, and especially now just with the pace of change in AI. And you know, I think that's why it's, you know, when I talk about why AI applications companies like Siri are so valuable, to actually be able to absorb that complexity on behalf of our customers is a lot of the value we provide. You don't want to have to, every time a new model comes out, you know, text your CIO and say, are we on that one, you know? You know, and I think, you know, this is, I think, at the end of the day, why sort of how the AI applications industry will play out is companies that can really navigate the complexity of this rapidly changing market, package it up as a solution so companies can get the value from AI without having to, you know, be a daily expert on all the new models coming out.
It's truly day to day. Well, I look forward to chatting the holiday season when I'm chatting with AI agent at Minted, because a lot of us, I'm sure, will be scrambling. That's interesting. I didn't realize about the concentration of their business. It's probably all of December, and I know they do a lot of other stuff, but I'm sure I will be using that agent at some point. Brett, it's great to have you. Thanks for talking about this wide range of topics. It's always great to get your take on it.
Thanks for having me.